So, I've had a whole lot of questions from people about buying land in Hawaii, questions about homesteading in Hawaii. Um, I even hear from people, is it possible to buy land in Hawaii? Um, a whole lot of mythology out there about this place. And we call it paradise, and as far as the rest of the U.S. is concerned, it probably is. But, paradise is pretty much a state of mind. And so the reality is that yes, you can buy land in Hawaii. Yes, you can also lease land in Hawaii, and yes, there is also land in Hawaii you cannot buy. Here in the southern part of the Big Island, both the districts of Kau and the districts of Puna, it's pretty easy to find a piece of land available. There's a lot of real estate down here. We're closer to the volcanoes, and so there's a lot of stuff that's lower priced and so on. Anyhow, I wanted to show you some before and after shots over here on my place. All right, here you can see the before. This particular piece of property that I purchased was cow pasture. It was 2 acres of cow pasture. We started back in 2004 by sticking in some koa trees. That's the little trees back here on the edge of the property line. But mostly it is grass. Lots and lots of grass. Itchy crabgrass, pile grass, waianaku grass. Property had been in one family since the 1930s, and mostly what they did with this land was raise cows. Now this is very different from a lot of the property, say for instance like where Marvin's place is at. It's just a couple of miles down the road here from me, but Marvin's deep inside a rainforest. I am not. I'm out here where the land had been used for agriculture for many, many years. 19th century they were growing coffee around here. 20th century they grew sugar cane. You can still see the cane sticking up on the other side of the street over there. And then more recently there's been cattle in this area. Next door there's a cattle ranch over there, 1,600 acres. As I said, this property had cattle walking around on it. So there's 1 acre of before. This property is 2 acres. I have not really touched the acre over here that's before, but over here on this side is the 2nd acre. And so this acre is the after, alrighty. This one I've finished planting large parts of it. Here you can see the margin along the edge where the grass still exists in a strip probably about 80 feet wide here at the rear of the property. And then there's the weed block where it stops along the edge. Most of my crops are inside on the weed block. There are all sorts of issues when it comes to planting in Hawaii, buying property in Hawaii, developing the land in Hawaii, and so on. In my case over here, as you saw, this was cow pasture. Mostly what I had was grass. Now, a lot of people, they have vines, jungle, guavas, and so on. Trees and such. I didn't really have any. There were a couple of guavas on the place, and that was about it. So back as early as 2007, this piece I'm standing on right now looked exactly like the piece next door to me here. Nothing but thick grass. The grass is so thick on this property that it's almost impossible to walk through it without tripping and falling down and getting smothered in the stuff. It is really something special as far as the thickness of the grass. It makes for good pasture. Yeah, it makes for good pasture, but it's lousy for doing just about anything else I can think of. And so first thing we had to do after we built the house back in 2007 was to tame down the grass, because it started eating the house alive. It was eating the plants that I was trying to grow. In general, it was not compatible with most other purposes other than grazing. And so, since I spend a lot of time in California on the mainland, and I can't be here all the time, because this house was built as a retirement home, I had to come up with a solution for how could I develop this property and get things moving here without having to be here constantly to maintain it, or without having to hire people to come in and do my work for me all the time. You know, a lot of people, well, they just get people to come in and mow. And so they'll mow and they'll cut everything with weed whackers and so on. Well, I tried that a couple times, and boy, oh boy, that adds up. Then, of course, there's other people, they'd use herbicides. Well, I don't like using herbicides. That's not one of my favorite ways to do business. And so what I finally landed on was the use of a woven industrial style weed block. Now, we've covered nearly an acre with the stuff here, and I was able to actually get rid of the grass that was on the property simply by running over it with my Jeep, flattening it down a little bit so it wasn't so hard to deal with, and then taking rolls of 12-foot wide, 300-foot long weed block and just rolling them out across the grass. Stapled it down with landscape staples, threw lava rocks on it to keep the wind from blowing it away, and just let everything underneath it just die. That didn't take too long, actually. We were pretty well in the way in 6 months. In 12 months, the grasses underneath are not only dead, but they were pretty well composted. So then I was able to come back through where I'd put the weed block down and just start to stick in my crops. All the crops that we have here on this property, most of them at least, were grown here on the site, either from seeds or cuttings in the nursery that's in my backyard. The rainfall in Puna is generally adequate enough that we can raise these plants in containers, get enough rain to keep them growing, and then when we put them in the field, I don't require irrigation ordinarily to get the plants to take. Now, again, this property has about 16 foot of soil underneath, made from volcanic ash. It's what they call andesol. It's a very, very good soil for a tropical environment. And so my plants have the benefit of a very deep earth that retains a fairly good amount of moisture. On the other hand, a lot of guys over here in Puna and also in places over in Kau, they're living on lava. Now, it may be green on top, there might even be grass growing over it, but it's still lava underneath the surface. That doesn't hold as much moisture, and it's a little harder for the plant roots to get in. So if you're working on lava land, you're like Marvin, you'll probably have to use a whole lot of organic matter in the process. In my place over here, just the plant waste is ordinarily enough organic matter. The soil works out fine. The big struggle was getting the grass out and keeping it out. Well, here you can see rows and rows of coffee plants. They're the most noticeable crop here on the skyline. Coffee is something that I like. I very much enjoy my coffee. Whether I really want to be a coffee farmer or not is entirely another story. Coffee is a good draw if you want to sell produce and attract people to an environment here, get them on your farm. If you have coffee, they'll come for it, just like wineries in California or breweries in Wisconsin. They'll come for the coffee in Hawaii. And so I have it here. It was also an argument with the tax man. My taxes are cheaper when I planted the land in a crop. I'm using the space between the coffee to grow pineapples. We've also added fruit trees. Like right here is a chico sapote. Right here we have a mame sapote that's growing quite well. This tree is a rather happy longan, the dragon eye fruit. Right here is one of my first and new durian, the ones that smell like old gym socks and garlic. Yep, we get $5 a pound for these stinky things here. This is that's the tree that chicle comes from, that chewing gum was originally made from. It's also got one of the best tasting sapote on earth. This is the one that tastes like pears and brown sugar. This tree is mame apple, which is again surrounded by pineapples down here on the base, and then again ringed with coffee plants. I have a larger mame apple right there that's gotten chewed up pretty good by some local grasshopper. Dwarf Williams bananas, again growing between the coffee plants. Right behind it here we have egg fruit, canistel, chico sapote. Right behind the egg fruit We have avocados, pineapples, and more pineapples. They're starting to smell up the air. Friends who grows exotic trees gave me some royal palms a while back. So I decided to put them out here. I'm currently using the trunk of the royals for raising some of my dragon fruit. And here's the famous Hawaiian koa tree that we make ukuleles and guitars out of. And I'm using the koa to support some dragon fruit back here too.